Before I really get into the passage, two interesting asides, I think, that we can see. Jesus obviously didn't walk around with a shining halo above his head or any shiny glow, because the crowds who were going to arrest him needed him pointed out. Jesus was just like you and I, or should I say, just like other men in his day. There was nothing remarkable in his appearance that would have distinguished him from others. They had seen him before. They would have perhaps wondered, is it that one or that one? But they wanted to make sure that they got the right person. And also they went with crowds. So many people armed with clubs and swords. They were expecting something different to what happened. Were they expecting to run away? Were they expecting the disciples and other followers to cause a fight? What were they expecting? If they were expecting it to go as it did, they would only need a couple of guys. But they went with crowds armed with swords and clubs. They wanted to get their man. And then considering the topic of betrayal. When was the last time you were really looking forward to something and it did not happen, either at all or in the way you thought it would or should, and you felt disappointed or let down? The more invested we are in someone or something, the greater the disappointment when we feel betrayed or let down. If we apply for tickets for an event we'd love to go to, and we know that for every 1,000 people who apply, only one will get a ticket, our expectation, our investment is perhaps low. And so if we do not get a ticket, we may barely register the disappointment. But if we do get that special ticket, and we have been so looking forward to the event, and we turn up at the event only to find, horror of horrors, the ticket's not valid. We're told at the gate it's fraudulent. Our disappointment will be huge. We've been telling our friends all about it. Our expectations are going hyper. We're so excited. We've got really invested in it. And the measure of our disappointment will be much greater. And then how do we respond? Surely they've got it wrong. It can't be. We probably have so many strong emotions in our disappointment. Perhaps feeling so let down, angry, wanting to pay back, get our revenge on somebody who sold us this fraudulent ticket. And yet, this story has relatively small consequences on the rest of our lives. Yet, we may have felt so strongly. And so what about Judas and the passage from Mark? How disappointed was Judas with Jesus? Jesus may have entered Jerusalem a few days before on a donkey rather than a war horse, but perhaps we could overlook that detail because of the large crowds that were cheering in their hero and their hope. Yet, perhaps the last few days had not worked out as Jesus had hoped. There was no evidence of any political or army overthrow of the Romans. Rather, lots of teaching on love and loving others, of forgiveness, of paying taxes to Caesar, of fig trees, of signs of the end of the age, of truly giving to God all that we have in our worship and adoration of him. And then even more on loving God and loving our neighbour as ourselves. The only physical act had been the overthrowing of the tables in the temple. But that was to enable people to worship God. Judas's disappointment with Jesus led him to betray Jesus. I suggest that this is one very good reason why in our daily lives we need to deal with disappointments as soon as we can and deal with them fully before God. For disappointments are what lead to betrayal. It's a bit like an action is never isolated from a thought. This story of the betrayal of Jesus is such a well-known story. There are a few scenes in the Passion of Jesus that have become more famous. Indeed, that have been lifted almost entirely from their original context. A Judas kiss has come to mean the worst kind of betrayal, not simply in that it is betrayal by one who is a close friend, but that the act of betrayal itself is in the context of a profession of intimacy. In this way, both the friendship and its sign are betrayed, are inverted and destroyed. There is certainly a heart-wrenching betrayal here. Mark uses a Greek word that describes not the peck on the cheek that a child might anticipate receiving from an elderly aunt, but this word that Mark uses indicates an intense, heartfelt kiss of great warmth that was reserved in the ancient world for the greeting of great and very close friends. Judas greets his teacher as a close friend, and in this way adds painful insult to injury. What a tragedy. An innocent man betrayed. But this was all within the sovereign plan of God. The tragedy lies in the deceit and denial of Judas. He walked with Jesus as others had. He experienced the same truth that they had witnessed, yet he betrayed Jesus. Judas chose to ignore the truth and deny Jesus. He refused to embrace the means of salvation, choosing rather a few pieces of silver. Judas had kissed the door of salvation, but would deny Jesus and walk away lost and condemned. We may wonder how Judas could have done such a thing. And yet, if we reflect deeply, perhaps too many of us follow his deceitful ways. We see the truth of Jesus and of God, but we deny it in our lives and in our actions. We may even show something of a public faith of belief, but our behavior betrays Jesus and his ways. You may have seen the display from Open Doors as you came in of the ways of the cross and the graphic images from the persecuted church. If we were really persecuted for our faith, would we be counted? as Christians? Would we stand up for Jesus and not betray him if we were faced with betrayal, imprisonment, or death? And I finish by reading from one of the posters headed Betrayal. Is your faith, is my faith in Jesus Christ strong like that of Brother Theo? Vietnamese Christian Theo was tied up and beaten because of his faith. My brother was the one who led the mob, he said. His brother, the one that betrayed him. His brother had continued to attack the family in horrific ways. He wants us to be angry at him and fight back against him and deny Jesus. But Theo is determined to forgive and to let go of the hatred in his heart. Pray for those who have been betrayed by people they trust. Betrayal hurts so much, but never forget the healing power of forgiveness.